Hello everyone, my name is Safia Murtala and today I'm doing a presentation on the 5 projective visions of Alan K. Henriksen's on the future of diplomacy. The terrain of public diplomacy is not only wide, it is very complex and interdisciplinary. In that regard, it must take some vision to deconstruct this field of study into 5 projective visions as Henriksen sought to do. The author's bold verdict has some merit, but his treatise is largely based on speculations, and after 15 years, time has done justice to Henriksen's projective visions for any student or enthusiast of diplomacy to subject his argument to a critical discourse analysis. In context, writing at the height of America's internationalism, the potpourri of Cold World War, the war on terror, globalization, burgeoning democracy, civil society boom, and the author's own liberal idiosyncrasies belied his 5 projective visions. These projections were largely anchored on the liberal international order, but even so at that time, shares this pride of place with other societies in the international system. The US still commands a huge share in the world economy and still has a large budgetary support for many states around the world, just as the case was 15 years ago. While the US was an economic primus inter pares, other states like Japan contested its economic primacy at the time of writing this article in 2005. Many states such as France and middle powers in the Nordic like Norway had soft power acumen and exerted that at a global scale. In reality, the liberal order was not monolithic, but had serious inadequacies which could have been a philosophical basis for making future projections on the future of diplomacy. Our first theme on Henriksen's projective visions is disintermediation. One of the potent merits of Henriksen's projection is disintermediation. This focus was as exact as it is evident in the rise of non-state actors, who have become either critical or complementary to state actions. Non-state actors are constituted in 2 broad categories: intergovernmental organizations and non-governmental organizations. These organizations, especially the intergovernmental organizations, have established a regime of principles in concert with states to standardize the shared ways of doing things. These non-state actors provide security and economic support to individuals and states. Other non-governmental organizations like Human Rights Watch, the Transparency International, and the Mo Ibrahim Index continue to improve international diplomacy by constantly checking the abuses suffered by individuals and reporting on them. Transparency International and the Mo Ibrahim Index continue to promote democratic accountability. Some multinational organizations like Apple control budgets that are larger than some states in the international system, and by so doing, they are able to bypass states in the conduct of foreign policy and international relations. However, mention must be made that states remain the primary actors in international system and continue to hold utmost significance, such as running missions. Our second theme is Europeanization. The argument of Europeanization holds merit to an extent, but one must be careful in conceding too reverence to the European Union in several respects. As much as the EU has become generally the standard for regional integration globally, it holds much consequence to argue that regional integration in the EU was incidental outcome of post-World War II. In other regions, integration was a natural reaction to the bipolarity when the world descended into the paroxysm of the Cold War. In the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, their version of integration is based a loosely political union, but strong towards the market approach. Henriksen missed out on the finer details of these nuances in regional integration, giving too much credit to the EU than it deserves. Besides, the much-touted European security and foreign policy as espoused by Alan K. Henriksen were ideas that were part of the institutional structures of the African Union in 1963 during its formation. Indeed, the main architect of the organization African Unity, now African Union, which was Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, had these policy planned published in his acclaimed book Africa Must Unite. That was in 1963. Besides, the dismemberment of the Brexit from the EU cast a blight on the efficacy of the EU, and this demystifies the ultra-potency of the European Union. Our third theme is democratization. There is today, as before, a huge divide on the democracy arguments, whether democracy, that's like human rights, precede human rights or vice versa. Democracy was fashionably in the early 2000s, but because of the strength of the appeal of the US in the international system, today the rise of China and other parastatal organizations like the China, Japan, Singapore, and most of what the World Bank described as high-performing economies adopt other governance systems apart from democracy, which is delivering results. In Rwanda, which is largely paternalistic, Paul Kagame's prudent application of donors' fund have marked him as an exemplar of a leader in the global south, even though his leadership style is not democratic. This defeats Henriksen's argument of democratization. Today, there are as many undemocratic states that are delivering developments as democratic ones. Thematization is our next one. Largely, Henriksen is near spot on this projection. It is tenable that states have traditional foreign policies. That of the US is military diplomacy, established of military base and lilipies around the world. China's own foreign policy is anchored on peaceful rise and development, which have pushed the Belt and Road Initiative via the provision of medium to long-term infrastructure in developing countries. Once a while, global issues such as climate change instigate diplomatic accords like the Paris Climate Accords does not reduce international diplomacy as the other affairs. Americanization is our last one. As Henriksen observes that diplomacy would be about reacting to the US still holds true because the US remain a potent world power, commanding a permanent seat in the Security Council, whose power influences in NATO, the World Trade Organization, and other organizations still unsettle some of the G8 and other now developed countries. Largely, this prediction has a far greater merit. However, there are related views to Henriksen's arguments. A content analysis of several texts advance the digitalization arguments, and the use of technology and gadgetry continues to change the form and practice of international diplomacy. As I always say, as Trump has demonstrated, social media is not only available to diplomats to tweet feel-good photos about themselves, but can harness the power of ubiquity of social media to broadcast, advocate, listen, engage in cultural and exchange diplomacy on serious issues with the rest of the world. Hence, the future of diplomacy is digital. Henriksen, in conclusion, what I think is Henriksen has done an appreciable work, no doubt about it, in organizing the practice of public diplomacy into 5 themes. But after 15 years, his projections about the rise of non-state actors are even more evident, and America's influence in the world is far from over, while many debate nebulous topic of American decline. No state has demonstrated the verve yet to unseat the US as the single most powerful state in the world. However, his predictions about Europeanization, Sematization, and democracy have not panned out well the way he would have thought. As already stated, the author's liberal leanings might have informed these projections. Nonetheless, the future of diplomacy would largely be counted within the digital boom. This might not necessarily change the practice of diplomacy, but will change the way diplomacy is practiced. Thank you.